step away. And that's a big deal. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about, to gain some perspective. So, during this COVID thing, nature became a rock star for everybody, because that is true. That is something that we can all accept as true and good. And climate change, we're trying to rearrange that, but that's okay. We can go. It's not okay, but it's happening. But for me to go out there, that's when I think I can be clearer in my assessment of what is real in my life. Does that
Well,
make any sense to you?
I'm a huge advocate of taking a social media fast in general and getting outside and away from the computer. I think my biggest tip, and I'll go through days of silence. There's no computer on, there's no phone, there's no nothing. I don't even talk, if you can believe it, Roger. I'm quiet for a couple of days, and it's just a sense of peace. To me, my cue that I'm absorbing too much of those things is how reactive am I getting? So if you're looking at social media and you're like, oh, look at this pretty cat picture. Oh, look at these pretty grandbabies. And then you see something political and you're like, "Rah!" And you're ready to angry type back. Maybe that's a sign that if you're reacting that way, it's obviously affecting you negatively. Might be time to take a little bit of a social media fast.
It can be overwhelming, Ken, and that's the way we started this. And the three of us have talked long and hard about lifestyle change and how best to do that, and how to adapt to certain things that come into our lives that are curveballs, and continue to grow. And Kaizen has always come up. Kaizen being small steps to eventually your goals or big change, but it's always about small steps towards whatever you want to do or be, or even if it's sanity. Small steps. You feel that's a factor in this whole idea of dealing with the age of trauma and how we as individuals respond to it?
Absolutely. I think just like Roger, when you talk about you can kites in your way through a big action step, a big goal, you can kites in your way through a thought. If your first thought is, what should I be doing with my life? And then you start the swirling because you don't know the answer and you feel like you should know the answer, you can kites in and break it down and start with something smaller, like what things in my life can't I live without? What things are most important? Okay, so family, or I really like when I can socially connect or bring the community together. Start kind of looking at the things that are important. And that might be step one, and step two might be what makes that important to me. And just asking yourself little tiny questions to pick apart the thought, because it's that big. If you start with that big thought, that's when you'll start the cycling.
That sounds good to me. So I'll challenge you here, and I'll give you a few moments because I'll ramble on after I ask the question. So what advice, what would be the first Kaizen step for someone who is struggling with so much going on in the world? I don't know what to do with me, my life. I don't know how to handle this. What's my role? I want to still be helpful to my family, and yet, I'm concerned about society, and all I've been doing is sitting on the sofa sucking my thumb, metaphorically, because I'm overwhelmed. So, what would each of you say would be the first step or two towards managing that? I think you've probably already said it, but, I'd like to be kind of concrete and practical with this as to, okay, step one, what should I do? Teresa?
Yeah. Well, overwhelm leads to inaction about 99.9% of the time. And that's what we're talking about, is just complete overwhelm with so much going on, swirling thoughts. So just realizing that it's your thoughts that is creating the overwhelm, right? To really zoom in on it. It's not the circumstances of the world so much as your interpretation of that, your thoughts about that create the overwhelm, and overwhelm leads to inaction almost always. So there's nothing wrong with that. These are difficult times. Whatever is happening for you is absolutely fine. But what about a more useful emotion? Like, what thoughts do you want to think? right? That would not create overwhelm, but would maybe create intentionality or motivation, right? Some useful feeling that would drive some actions that would make a difference, that would make an impact in your life. So first of all, what are we thinking? Be a very good eavesdropper. Document those thoughts. Notice what each thought is making you feel. Is that how you want to be feeling? Does that lead to the action you want to be taking? If not, go out thought shopping. They're free, and try them on like an outfit and see how each one makes you feel, and choose a true thought that creates a useful feeling that drives the actions that you want to be taking, that creates the results that you want for yourself at this point in your life.
Wow, that sounds powerful and doable. Yeah. Danielle, what would you advise?
I'm kind of a synthesis of, I guess, being a writer and being an avid meditator and meditation facilitator. I kind of go back to those two things, which fits perfectly with what we're talking about. I think step one, when you're in that overwhelm, is just take a breath, take a few deep breaths, stimulate the vagus nerve, kind of learn how to relax a little bit. And then, as Teresa mentioned, get out a notebook and jot down what all the things I'm thinking. And as you do that, if there are ones that are unhelpful, Teresa mentioned find a new thought. Can you actually write down what might be a better thought that I can choose to believe? And then there's some practical, once you get to the place where your mind isn't all over the place and you kind of can see what's there, you can start to pick it apart. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to deal with this entire list. Pick one. What's the most important thing to me right now? And how can I break that down? What makes it important? What kind of support system, like what might I do to improve the situation? Who might I contact for support? And just asking lots of little tiny kites and questions, and if you're not sure what questions to ask yourself, think, well, what might you ask a friend if they were going through the same thing and you're being supportive? And I would also suggest be as nice to yourself as you'd be to a friend, and not yell at yourself, because we talk way nicer to our friends than we talk to ourselves.
Wow. Another one. Well, that's fantastic. That's it's practical, it's doable, it makes sense to me, and we should end there. But I want to tell just a brief story, really brief. So with this pandemic, all of our lives were totally upset. So all of those ritualistic things that brought us comfort, many were gone. And then there's all the threats that were there, not only with the pandemic, but all the other things that this article talks about. But so I started to draw, Now, it was drawing, but little did I realize at first, but soon did know that my mind went to a totally different place. I mean, I was mindful, I was present. I wasn't in my head with all of this stuff that was going on. And I would draw, and, a lot of time would go by. And when that was over, not only did I have the pleasure of having done something and doing that, but I felt much more anchored, more and peaceful, to be able to see all those things not swirling so much in my head now, but swirling out there in the world. And I'm not going to bring them back in my head. Of course, they would come in again. But when we can do things like that, and that can be anything, right? That can be with a pet, that, as we said, with nature, that can be drawing. And that's usually, we talk about those things in association with stress, but isn't this what this is all about? I mean, when we're unmoored, so to speak, and in a storm, and how do we get so that we can go in the right direction, or at least a direction, steadily, to get better. So anyway, so I know you probably you have agriculture, Teresa, which that puts your mind right. I don't want to speak for you, but I'll bet it does.
It does.
And Danielle, you do about 1,000 things that like dancing.
I was going to say, Roger, you were talking about your paintings. My COVID therapy was writing 3 books in a year. So yeah. I can look at my books and you can look at your paintings and think COVID therapy. but you're talking about mindfulness. So not everybody I'm glad you brought it up, because not everybody can sit and meditate and calm their mind. But if they give your mind something to do, like paint or write or garden or anything, you're giving your brain something else to do beside cycle. So I'm really glad that you told that story.
I think we talk about meditation and mindfulness and being present, but that's kind of abstract. I think in this context, the way we have brought it up, and in this, I think I hope it has become more real. It has for me, as to the value of this. It isn't some sort of Asian thing where you go sit up on a mountain, and in a robe, it's the way of putting yourself, your mind, your emotions, everything in a stabilized place to deal with all that other stuff that's all around you. I'm thinking. So this is really a complex topic. We should probably add to this. We should do another podcast, don't you think? And build on this.
Let's do it.
What do you think? I can hear people out there. Yeah, I want to hear more. I'm sure they are. I know I do from the two of you, because I've learned some things today. A lot of things that I may have heard, but I think this puts them now into context, so to speak, and makes them much more practical for me, and I hope for others who listen.
Masterpiece is driven by data and powered by content. Maximizing healthy longevity is achievable at all times with the right metrics and content, enabling informed decisions. Powered by Masterpiece can support your community in the critical areas of focus that drive healthy longevity for your residents, staff, and community. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com. We want to continue to provide information that is valuable and reliable to our listeners. We welcome your comments and suggestions for topics that are important to you. Please see the description of this episode to contact the Brightside team. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.